All right, well, welcome everyone to our webinar series, ENERGY STAR Multifamily High-Rise as a Path to LEED for Homes and Enterprise Green Communities Compliance. This course is approved for 1 hour in continuing education, AIA HSW, GVCI LEED AP Homes Specific, Mary Green, AIBD, CGP, and may be relevant to your local state-based or design contractor license. Today I'll be your moderator. My name is Brett Little, and I am the Executive Director here at the Green Home Institute. Green Home Institute is a nonprofit with a mission to make healthier and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. Huge thanks to our sponsors who allow us to do this, Anderson Windows, Panasonic, check them out, our members, our volunteers, board of directors, and all of our partners and speakers. And also, if you support our mission and what we do, check out our website. You can get involved, get discounts on trainings and other things as well. All right, so with that, I will introduce our guest speaker. We have a lot to go over today for this session. And so very thankful to Stephen Winter Associates and our instructor, Gayatri. She's a senior building systems engineer at Stephen Winter Associates, resident accredited rating quality assurance provider as well. She graduated from Pennsylvania State University with a BS in engineering science, and from the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a master's in mechanical engineering, and a graduate in energy policy and management. She's ASHRAE certified building energy modeling professional, HERS rater, resident QA delegate, and currently provides technical support to the EPA's multifamily high-rise program with over 10 years of experience supporting ENERGY STAR certification of units in the multifamily building. So with that, I will hand it over to Gayatri, and thanks for everyone for joining us.
Okay, thanks, Brett. So as Brett mentioned, today we're going to be talking about ENERGY STAR for a multifamily building. It's kind of an assumption that most of you have at least some experience or knowledge of the LEED for Homes rating system and Enterprise Green Communities certification. We won't really be going in depth on those two rating systems, but really more about how ENERGY STAR for multifamily high-rise interacts with those two certifications. So I'll start off with a quick introduction into the various ENERGY STAR programs that are applicable to multifamily. I'll talk about how the mandatory requirements in multifamily high-rise complement some of the mandatory and some of the credits in the LEED and the Enterprise Green Communities programs. For those of you who are interested in actually pursuing the certification, I'll go through a quick overview of the multifamily high-rise program in terms of the process and the actual technical requirements. We usually get a lot of questions on how the testing and verification that we do at ENERGY STAR compares to LEED's commissioning. So I do a compare and contrast at the very end. I will leave a couple of minutes at the end for some questions and answers. You're going to see our email address throughout this presentation. You can always hold comments and just email them to us. You will get a copy of the PDF of all the slides, so you will have all this information. You don't need to write any of it down. If there's a really burning question, I'm going to ask Brett to go ahead and stop me. I probably will be talking pretty quickly because there's a lot of information, but some of this information we're going to breeze through because I want the PDF to actually be a resource for you guys once you do start going through LEED or through Enterprise. That way you can come back to it and do, do a quick search for a certain credit or prerequisite that you're interested in. So with that, I'm going to advance the next slide, STAR. So big picture, if you've never been involved in ENERGY STAR building program, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the product line. So any kind of ENERGY STAR product like lights, refrigerators, furnaces, air conditioners, consumers know and recognize the ENERGY STAR label to mean that those products are going to be at least 15% more energy efficient than a product that's not labeled. So they don't need to know the technology that goes into that appliance or furnace. They just know that that blue label means it's going to be energy efficient. So ENERGY STAR took that concept and applied it to a program for certified homes. So in the same respect, a home buyer could go and buy a single family home and know that if it has that ENERGY STAR label, it's going to use 15% on average less energy than a home that's just built to code. And then similar concept for commercial buildings like offices, retail spaces, schools. They can pursue ENERGY STAR certification, which distinguishes their building as being more energy efficient than their peers. So the question is, how does multifamily actually fit into this space? Because it's kind of relevant to all of these three categories. The new multifamily program had to be developed to specifically address the issues faced in that sector. So the multifamily buildings, we have a couple of programs for them. So today's session is definitely going to focus on new construction. So if you have a new construction multifamily building that you're working on, there's two programs that it could participate. So it depends on whether it's going to go into the Certified Homes program or whether it's going to fall under multifamily high-rise. So we will get into the nitty-gritty details of eligibility, but at a high level, what we call our Certified Homes program was developed with single-family homes in mind. It was extended out to cover low-rise multifamily buildings, because low-rise multifamily, 1, 2, and 3-story buildings, they actually follow the same residential code that single-family homes do. So ENERGY STAR extended the Certified Homes program out to accommodate those low-rise multifamily buildings, and even further to accommodate some of the 4- and 5-story multifamily buildings that were very similar in nature to single-family homes. So we'll get back into the eligibility later, but just as an introduction to this to the program, some multifamily would fall under certified homes. So any kind of multifamily building that's taller or just doesn't meet the criteria of certified homes comes into multifamily high-rise. Previously, there wasn't a program up until about 5 years ago, and so basically this program came into the arena at 2011 and just provided an offering for any building that had previously been ineligible. I'm not going to talk too much about existing multifamily buildings, just wanted to introduce this program because it only became recently available as of September 2014. So this is the same concept as an office or a retail or a school. When they want to pursue ENERGY STAR certification, this certification wasn't available a few years ago. They developed the spec for it, and now existing multifamily buildings can also get ENERGY STAR certification in the same way that offices and retail buildings do. This is a different approach than certified homes and multifamily high-rise, which we're going to talk about today, but this is actually built based on performance. So you actually enter in 12 months of utility bills for your building, and based on the actual energy use for that year, they compare you to a similar building in a similar climate zone, and if you use less energy than 75% of your peers, you're going to get a score that's about 75, which is going to indicate that this building is eligible for ENERGY STAR certification. So this is an opportunity now for existing multifamily buildings. They need to at least be occupied for 1 year. You do need to have energy bills for all the units, which can be a challenge in multifamily buildings if your tenants pay their own electric bills or their own gas bills and you don't have a lease agreement in place that says they have to share that information with you. It can be challenging to get all the bills for every space in the building, but that is a requirement to pursue this certification. If you guys are more familiar with new construction and you really don't work in the existing multifamily building world, all new construction buildings eventually will become an existing building. So within a year of occupancy, they can pursue this certification. So for today's session, we're really trying to show you how ENERGY STAR fits into the green building community. So whether it's LEED or Enterprise or some other green building rating system, while most people understand that to build a sustainable building, it's not just energy efficiency, it's all these other categories, water efficiency, sustainable materials, reducing waste. We want people to understand that ENERGY STAR doesn't necessarily just focus on energy efficiency. We do have some requirements in place that help contribute to water efficiency as well as indoor air quality. You'll see that in LEED and in Enterprise, they reference an ASHRAE standard 62.2, which has minimum requirements for ventilation. That's the same standard that ENERGY STAR references. In terms of water efficiency, EPA, in addition to their ENERGY STAR program, has an Indoor Air Plus program as well as a Watersense program. The Watersense program actually certifies products similar to the way ENERGY STAR certifies appliances. So you can buy shower heads and toilets that are Watersense certified. So we do have that as one of our requirements. So you'll see in the next couple slides that ENERGY STAR requirements do have an overlap with some of these other categories, and it's not just about energy efficiency. So to those of you that are building these buildings, to our developers, we want to focus on the fact that it's not just that you're building an energy efficient building when you have ENERGY STAR. These buildings are, proven to be more affordable because as you increase your energy efficiency, the bills are going to be lower. So if you're working for low-income housing, having those units actually be affordable is very important to the residents in your building. And again, it doesn't just stop at energy efficiency or water efficiency. The ENERGY STAR requirements do improve the comfort of the units as well as the durability of the building. We do have various finance lenders and agencies that recognize the benefit of building to the ENERGY STAR specifications, so you can get preferred financing as well as utility-sponsored incentives for meeting the requirements of ENERGY STAR. In addition, there are some avenues for recognition through ENERGY STAR. We have awards as well as a way to showcase your building on our website. So that's just kind of, the reasons to pursue the certification in addition to the certifications like LEED and Enterprise that you're already considering. So let's get into how these work in those two rating systems. So this is just a summary slide. The next, about dozen slides are going to go through each of these prerequisites and credits. So again, this is just a summary slide. You don't need to take it all in. But what we're going to talk about today, there's two different certification programs, LEED for Homes as well as Enterprise Green Communities. In terms of LEED for Homes, I'm going to talk about both the 2010 rating system, so multifamily mid-rise, as well as LEED v4. The reason I'm going to talk about both is because I understand that you guys can still register under the 2010 system until about October, and some of you can choose to register for LEED v4. So I want to talk about both of those. 2011 and 2015 Enterprise Green Communities, the text is actually identical here, but I will show slides about how ENERGY STAR requirements overlap with those rating systems. So like I said, that was a summary slide. I'm just going to go through each one and show how it overlaps in these various categories. So in LEED for Homes, if you're not familiar, the WE stands for water efficiency. So for indoor water use, they offer points. So certain things are prerequisites, which you have to do, and certain things are points. So in one of their point categories for indoor water use, it's high efficiency fixtures. So the next series of slides in the black, dark gray text is the text actually from the LEED for Homes rating system. The blue text just kind of is commentary on whether it would satisfy ENERGY STAR or whether you'd have to do some additional step to satisfy ENERGY STAR. So in this one, the LEED language, the 2010 LEED language, would say you would get a point if the average flow rate for all lab faucets was less than 2 gallons per minute. ENERGY STAR has that same less than 2 gallons per minute prerequisite, but we extend that to all faucets. So if you were trying to do LEED, but you also want to do ENERGY STAR, and you wanted this point, it has to be laboratory, but you'd also have to add on the kitchen for ENERGY STAR. So similar concept, showers, LEED requires it to be less than 2 gallons per minute per stall. ENERGY STAR also has that less than 2, but also adds on a requirement for Watersense. And like I said, EPA has this Watersense certification program for water fixtures. Toilets, they have the option. You can either be less than 1.3 gallons per flush or Watersense certified. If you just go ahead and choose that Watersense certified option, that is going to satisfy the prerequisite in ENERGY STAR multifamily high-rise. If you're going for the 2-point category, so not just high efficiency, but very high efficiency under the LEED 2010 rating system, same concept, but they've now, you have to do something slightly better. So now it's down to 1.5 gallons per minute or Watersense. So our requirements didn't change. So you still need less than 2. You need, and you also need to extend it out to the kitchen faucets. Shower heads, they reduce the flow rate, but you're still going to have to add Watersense to meet ENERGY STAR's prerequisite. And likewise for the toilets, it's a lower gallons per flush to get the extra 2 points under LEED, but you're going to still have to add on Watersense if you're also trying to meet ENERGY STAR multifamily high-rise. So there's a lot of overlap in terms of water efficiency. EA stands for energy and atmosphere. So under the 2010 system, the first prerequisite is to optimize energy performance. So you have to demonstrate 15% savings over ASHRAE 90.1 2007. If you're coming from like the low-rise world and you're more used to a HERS index approach, the way they quantify performance in the mid-rise, high-rise world is to show savings over this standard. So in ENERGY STAR multifamily high-rise, we also require a minimum of 50% savings over ASHRAE 90.1. The 2007, it depends on the state code, and we'll get into that in a little bit, and that's why I have this asterisk here. It depends on your state code, but if your state code is 2009 IECC, your performance target is 15% savings compared to the ASHRAE 90.1 2007 building. In ENERGY STAR, we don't include the on-site power generation, so solar PV cannot be used to contribute to achieving 15%. We want 15% to come directly from energy conservation measures and not through generation. So in terms of testing and verification, so they offer option 1, which is to meet the ENERGY STAR multifamily high-rise testing and verification T&V protocol. So if you were following multifamily high-rise certification, you'd be following those protocols and you would automatically satisfy this option 1. If you weren't and you were just choosing option 2, LEED has their own list of testing and verification requirements. They call it commissioning. They have a duct leakage to the outside test. For those of you who are familiar with this, this is a depressurization of in-unit forced air systems to see how much they leak to the outside of the unit. Our test in multifamily high-rise is a total duct leakage test rather than to the outside. They require fundamental commissioning of central systems, similar to what you would do in LEED and C. This is more robust than what occurs in ENERGY STAR multifamily high-rise, which is more checking model nameplates and efficiency, something the level of what a HERS rater could do. Air barrier details, that has to be included. It's very similar to ENERGY STAR. LEED requires compliance with the thermal enclosure system raters checklist. We don't reference that checklist explicitly, but what you'd find in these sections is very similar to what we do in ENERGY STAR multifamily high-rise. This looks like a short list, but then if you compare it to what you'd also find in the water efficiency and environmental quality sections, you'll see that if you were in those sections, those also would require some amount of verification of low flow fixtures and ventilation and the blower door test. So in terms of earning points, those are the prerequisites, and now we're looking at points in the 2000 rating system. That same energy model that you use to show 15% over 2007, whatever that model says, you know, if it's 20% or 25%, that's just simply going to contribute to the points you can get in this category. They do have another point for pipe installation, so while LEED only requires R4 installation, which is less than an inch, in ENERGY STAR multifamily high-rise, you're going to have to do at least 1 inch. So just by virtue of doing multifamily high-rise and meeting our prerequisite, you'd satisfy the points in LEED. In terms of ventilation, so EQ, I think this is environmental quality. We're very similar to LEED for homes. We do reference the ASHRAE 62.2 and 62.1 2007 standards, so we do require those. In terms of 62.1, this is what happens in the common spaces outside of the units. We do also allow the natural ventilation, so that's identical. The difference here is that while both programs require whole unit ventilation, ENERGY STAR multifamily high-rise has not yet required a supply of outdoor air. So since the ASHRAE 62.2 would allow a entirely exhaust-only system to satisfy whole unit ventilation, LEED does not. So that is a key difference between LEED 2010 and ENERGY STAR multifamily high-rise. Third-party performance testing, if you want that point in LEED, it's a prerequisite. It's a mandatory in ENERGY STAR multifamily high-rise. If you were doing ENERGY STAR, you would get that point. In terms of local exhaust, so we were just talking about whole unit ventilation before, which means it's more about how many occupants and how big the apartment is. You need a constant supply of fresh air based on the occupancy. Now we're talking about local exhaust, how to get the moisture out of the bathrooms and contaminants out of the kitchen. So basic local exhaust, same prerequisite in ENERGY STAR multifamily high-rise, whether you're in the bathroom, the kitchen, common spaces, it's the same. Again, you do have to test those flow rates for multifamily high-rise, so you're going to get a point in LEED for doing so. The space heating and space cooling systems, we also require in ENERGY STAR multifamily high-rise to do the sizing. So we want the system size as well as the ductwork size correctly and installed accordingly, so that's the same. In terms of return airflow, getting that air to get back to the return side of the air handler, in multifamily high-rise and LEED, very similar requirements in terms of providing jump ducts or transfer gills, something to maintain the return airflow back to the air handler. I think LEED probably just has a slight extra step where you have to test the pressure differential or at least size the openings to a certain level. So LEED is probably a little bit more, has more requirements than ENERGY STAR in order to earn this 1 point. So another similarity in terms of garage pollutant protection. We do require that the garages be very, very well sealed. We do want, garages to be meeting whatever code requirement ventilation in terms of CFM per square foot. ENERGY STAR would allow, sensors, so carbon monoxide sensors in order to stop those fans from running 24/7, because there is a balance between energy efficiency and indoor air quality. So if you can achieve the same amount of indoor air quality by running those really, really large energy-intense fans only a couple hours a day rather than 24 hours a day, we would definitely encourage that, as long as you're not sacrificing indoor air quality. And then in terms of compartmentalization, this is a prerequisite for both our programs, and for LEED 2010, it's the same metric, 0.30 CFM 50 per enclosure. And what that means is, you calculate the enclosure of an apartment, so floor, ceiling, walls, and multiply by 0.3, and they'll tell you what your allowance is. And this is, again, measured at 50 pascals, just the same as you would for a single-family house. I do see a question that came in, and it is specific to LEED. I am more familiar with ENERGY STAR Multifamily High-Rise than I am to LEED, so Brett, I'm not sure if you can email that person directly, because I don't want to speak to LEED and any of the addenda they might have. My expertise is really in ENERGY STAR Multifamily High-Rise. So if you have questions specific to LEED or Enterprise, I'll probably defer to Brett to answer those. So those previous slides were all the 2010 slides, so now we're moving on to version 4. And this, when they upgraded to version 4, they definitely got more in line with multifamily high-rise. So in terms of stringency, so some of the prerequisites you'll start seeing LEED being more stringent actually than ENERGY STAR Multifamily High-Rise. So you don't have to do quite as much. The only place where that's not quite the same is here, which is the minimum energy performance. When you're going through LEED V4, you're going to see the P is for prerequisite and the C is for credit. So prerequisite, mandatory, you have to do it. This simulation, it's 5% savings over ASHRAE 90.1 2010. So like I said before, ENERGY STAR Multifamily High-Rise is 15% over 2007, and now because we have codes that have already gone past 2009 IECC and past 2012 IECC, we have some that are doing 2015 IECC, we had to start modifying our performance target. So it really kind of depends on your state code and when you permitted what your percent savings over which of these standards. So that's why I have to say, it's not necessarily true that what you do for ENERGY STAR will automatically satisfy this, but there's still overlap. It's still the same model, the same guidelines to create that model. So the model, you don't have to do extra work for it. It's just that the target might be slightly different. We got on the same page here where now neither LEED nor ENERGY STAR will allow the on-site power to meet this prerequisite. You can use the on-site power to contribute to this credit where you can get points for anything that's above and beyond that 5%. So an example, if you're in a state where, we deem your performance target to be 15% over 90.1 2010, you could be eligible for 10 points. So the next slide, so the minimum energy performance, this is very similar to the 2010 rating system. Option 1 is following ENERGY STAR's testing and verification protocols. Option 2 is LEED's commissioning, so very similar as before. There are some extra tests that you have to do for ENERGY STAR, but it's just because it's not in this section. It's actually in their water efficiency and their environmental quality sections. In terms of water efficiency, again, very similar to what I was trying to say is that, they advanced their requirements here. So laboratory faucets have to be Watersense labeled. Flow rates got lower. So LEED tends to exceed ENERGY STAR Multifamily High-Rise in stringency. In this exact one, because they just mentioned laboratory faucets, you would still have to add the kitchen faucet here. Their requirement here exceeds ENERGY STAR Multifamily High-Rise, and here we're on the same page, both require WaterSense. That last one is the clothes washer. ENERGY STAR does require ENERGY STAR certified clothes washers. Ventilation, again, very, very similar to what it was in the 2010 rating system. They upgraded to 2010, whereas ENERGY STAR is still using 2007. The CFM is actually the same. If you're following 2007 versus 2010, the CFM is actually the same, so there's really not a significant change between the two. Their compartmentalization results, though, they did make that more stringent, and it's a prerequisite. It's a P right here. So they dropped down to 0.23, while ENERGY STAR is still at 0.30. If you're looking for points, they drop it even further down to 0.15. So enterprise green communities, similar kind of concept. There's just one slide for 2011, and then I have another slide for 2015, but same kind of concept. We overlap in water, energy, and indoor air quality, basically. So while if you're following enterprise green communities, I only did the mandatory requirements rather than their point categories. Here, the only add would be to add Watersense to toilets and shower heads. If you followed enterprise green community and you added Watersense to these two things, that would meet the ENERGY STAR prerequisite. Same thing here. You want to demonstrate compliance with multifamily high-rise. At one point, they required certification, and then as of January 2015, instead of certification, they did accept LEED's alternative compliance path, which is kind of what I described before, which was 15% over 2007, and following their own commissioning steps. There are some overlap in some of the other mandatory requirements in enterprise green communities related to sizing, ENERGY STAR appliances, and efficient lighting, as well as ENERGY STAR exhaust fans, the 62 ventilation rates similar to LEED in garages. So I won't go through this. This is the only change here is 2015. So again, this is all text directly from enterprise green communities. You can see as they advance, similar to LEED advancing to V4, we got more on the same page. There's actually no additional requirement. If you're doing ENERGY STAR multifamily high-rise, they both simultaneously satisfy both requirements. They still don't require that you certify to the ENERGY STAR standard. So you could choose to certify, or you could continue to follow this LEED alternative path. With same overlap in these other mandatory sections in energy efficiency as well as in environment and indoor air quality. Okay, so in terms of those on the phone that just want to understand a little bit more about, if we want to do multifamily high-rise, how does it interact with the certification process? First, you need to know whether you're even eligible for multifamily high-rise versus certified homes. So as I said, I get into the gory details. We said multifamily buildings less than 3 stories definitely go into certified homes, just like a single-family home. I talked about some 4- and 5-story multifamily buildings that can stay in certified homes. They'd have to have all in-unit systems, like an in-unit furnace, split AC, in-unit hot water heater, and then the building itself couldn't have more than 20% common space. So maybe it's garden-style apartments, or it has maybe just one common corridor, maybe a stairwell, and that's it. There won't be a lot of amenity space in a building that has less than 20% common space. All the other kind of configurations of multifamily buildings are going to come into multifamily high-rise. So those same mid-rise 4- and 5-story buildings that have either central systems or too much common space or anything above 6 stories, those are all coming into multifamily high-rise. If you have, if you kind of struggle with eligibility, if you go on our website, we have this kind of simple yes/no flow chart that should help you. It's got a series of footnotes that should help you figure out if you're in certified homes or multifamily high-rise. Since we don't have my animation, these are just some classic examples that we get. So, this first one is a 6-story building with 4 units. While that seems improbable, we've definitely had that situation in New York City. Central system, while most people intuitively would feel like that would go into multifamily high-rise, it's actually still served by our certified homes program because it only has 4 units. Similar as this 3-story building that has central systems and a lot of common area, because it's 3-story, again, is still served by certified homes. This next example, before you even read the entire description, it's 7-story, so again, you would think it's multifamily high-rise, but we do have a footnote that clarifies how you deal with these 2 stories of parking garage. We have a lot of multifamily high-rise that will do a podium of garage with residential units above. The garages technically don't always qualify as a story. So in this situation, they don't qualify as a story. So this is really just a 5-story mid-rise building with all in-unit systems and very little common area, so it could be served under the Certified Homes Program. These next 2 examples actually go into multifamily high-rise, 7-story building. The only difference between these 2 examples, this is a retail on the first 2 stories rather than a garage, which means it does qualify as a story. So this is a 7-story building, automatically multifamily high-rise. This last example, 5.5 stories. Had it been just 5 stories with all in-unit systems and not a lot of common area, it could have been certified homes, but because of that half story, that ends up qualifying as a full story, and this is now a 6-story building, and it goes into multifamily high-rise. The performance target, again, because the animation is not on, you're seeing a lot of text on here, so bear with me. This first bullet just kind of reiterates that our performance target is to always be 15% better than code. So 15% more energy efficient, 15% lower energy cost than a building that was just complying with the ASHRAE standard 90.1 2007. The second bullet, the way it correlates, ASHRAE 90.1, if you're in the commercial section of the ICC, the commercial section always references ASHRAE 90.1 as an alternative compliance path. So if you're familiar with 2009 ICC, that correlates to ASHRAE 90.1 2007. If you're in 2012 ICC, we're talking about 2010. So that's the correlation. So let's say, you're in a state that has moved forward and they are already enforcing the 2012 ICC, while ENERGY STAR, for other states is 15% over 2007. Because your state is more progressive and more advanced and has established 2012, your performance target in that state is now 15% over ASHRAE 90.1 2010. There isn't a national fixed standard. It follows the state code. For those of you who are still trying to do like LEED for homes or some other rating system, and it'd be easier instead of juggling two energy models, if ENERGY STAR would allow you to keep a 2007 baseline, we've agreed, and we now just increase the performance target to 20%. So if you have an energy model and it's based on 2007 because you're doing LEED multifamily mid-rise 2010, that's fine. Just the target gets a little higher. States that have 2015 ICC, I think some of you on this call might be in a state that is enforcing 2015. The percent, if you want to stick to 15% above code, that's 15% over ASHRAE 90.1 2013. Again, we established some alternatives. If you are still using that 2000 baseline for LEED, you'd have to increase it to 25% over that. The questions we get about this policy, this is definitely posted on our website. If you just go to our main page, it's on there. We do follow the commercial code, and it's not the residential code, and it has to be the one adopted by the state. So ignore any local, city, town codes. We're only following the state code. If there is a transitional period, you get grandfathered in and this is adopted, but there's a grace period, just give us a call or email us, and we can help you understand whether you would be, what your performance target is based on those transitions. A lot of states do have an amended code where maybe they adopted 2015 ICC, but with amendments, you'd have to demonstrate to us that that code isn't actually more energy efficient than the 2012 ICC. We haven't done those kind of evaluations, but if you wanted to come to us with examples, we could certainly consider it. And I don't think anyone's on the call from California, but we do have a performance path for California if you are. In terms of the folks we work with, obviously we have a developer, somebody's building this ENERGY STAR building, so their role, ENERGY STAR doesn't charge any money. There's no enrollment, there's no registration, no certification fees, but the developer does have to pay a team of people, their engineer, their architect, and maybe, somebody to do the verification for them. So all the costs are borne by the developer. That's their responsibility. And they have to make sure that the measures get installed into their building. They're the ones who then going to get access to our ENERGY STAR logo and can market the building. So they're kind of the person that we work with. The person on, like the boots on the ground, who's actually the liaison in terms of the technical requirements, that's what we call a licensed professional. So if you're coming to us from the low-rise world and you're used to working with a HERS rater, ENERGY STAR Multifamily High-Rise works with a licensed professional. That's because HERS raters aren't really credentialed above 3 stories. So we work with a licensed professional. It can be the team's registered architect. It can be the professional engineer. It doesn't have to be a third-party licensed professional, although a developer can certainly hire an energy consulting firm that has a licensed professional. They don't have to use their own architect. They can choose whichever one they want to do. But basically that licensed professional is the one who's going to review all the documents before they get submitted to ENERGY STAR to make sure all the requirements are being met. If they want to stub out some of that work, if they don't know how to do a blower door test, they don't know how to inspect insulation, they can definitely stub it out to other groups. But at the end of the day, they're the ones who are signing and stamping and submitting the information to ENERGY STAR. If you're looking for a licensed professional, if you're interested in the multifamily high-rise program, we have started a it's very new, a licensed professional directory. And so if a licensed professional has completed at least the proposed design submittal, has gotten one of those approved through ENERGY STAR, they can seek us out and then get added to this list. So if you are looking for someone in your area, we're hoping this list gets longer and longer. and you can go here to find somebody that can help you with your project. So in terms of the overall certification process, you do the partnership agreement is online. When you get the PDF for this, this will be a hyperlink, and you can just click on it, and it'll send you to our website where it's an online partnership agreement. The project application is a form fillable PDF. So you'd submit that, it enrolls you in our program, and basically it locks you into a set of fixed requirements. So for the next 3 years, until you have 3 years basically to complete your design process. We won't change the goalposts on you in those 3 years, but you do have to submit a design to us within 3 years. So that's the value of the project application. Once you enter the design phase, you're looking to include our prerequisites as well as do your energy modeling. I'm focused on the right-hand side of this slide rather than the left. The left side is really just for those of you who, based on the eligibility slide, feel like maybe your multifamily is going to go through the Certified Homes program. It's very similar in concept, so I have those on the left for you guys. But again, yeah, you're looking to design the building to meet the mandatory requirements as well as the various measures you've chosen to achieve 50% savings. So after the design is complete, you submit this. You want to submit this prior to bid. That's ideal, it's not mandatory, but the only way we can help you is if you submit it to us before it goes out to bid, because if we can catch any requirements that are missed, we'll let you know. We won't approve it until we let you know of all the requirements that we feel like aren't represented in your construction documents. We're going to review the energy model to make sure we also feel confident that your energy modeler has calculated it correctly, rather than you going in and not seeing us again until the final building is ready for occupancy, and then realize that your modeling was incorrect or you missed a prerequisite and you can't get certification. So ENERGY STAR was definitely adamant about having a design submittal. I'm not sure if LEED does, but I think Enterprise also has this kind of interaction with the project early on in the process. And again, it's more to just make sure everyone's on the same page before you go into construction, and more importantly, before it goes out to bid. So your GCs know they need to bid this at a level to meet all the ENERGY STAR requirements. Once you get approved, you enter the construction phase, again, very similar to the low-rise certified homes program. We're looking at air sealing and insulation, and once all the equipment is, we just want to verify that everything was installed as paid for. If you upgraded to CR16 air conditioner and LED light bulbs, we want somebody boots on the ground making sure everything was installed, because again, the partner, the ENERGY STAR partner is the developer. They're the ones footing the bill for this, and ENERGY STAR wants to make sure they get all the upgrades that they paid for. Again, you update your model, you update the templates that I'll show you later on. Those come back to the EPA for final review and approval. At this point, you do have to provide some kind of photo documentation, at least for a few of your first 3 certified projects. But you do have to submit this back to EPA. I believe that's very similar to LEED and Enterprise, so that submission process is similar to those rating systems. Once a building gets approved for certification, you'll get, all departments can be marketed as being ENERGY STAR certified. The next requirement is to do benchmarking. So now benchmarking is a two-step process. So, the reason we do it is not because we just want to be bureaucratic because it's the government. It's because benchmarking is really how you're going to make your energies perform and use less energy. So the 2 steps, one is just tracking your utility bills, entering every month how much electricity and gas your building uses. The second part is to compare it to something, whether you compare it to what you used last year or whether you compare it to another building that maybe you built to code and this is your ENERGY STAR building. It's the actual process of comparing your data to another similar building. And that's how you're going to identify whether it's filling errors or whether, all these upgrades made sense, and if you're using less energy than your other buildings. If you did an upgrade and you want to see, in July you upgraded your air conditioner and you want to see that it's using less energy than it did the year before, that's what benchmarking enables you to do. It also, as you're doing that, it is going to qualify you for that ENERGY STAR certification that I briefly mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. So once you have 12 months of data, as long as you have it for every unit, it'll automatically calculate whether you hit that 75, which you need, and if you did, then you're eligible for that ENERGY STAR certification. That's the annual one compared to what we're talking about right now, which is kind of based on your design and your construction. So technical requirements. Similar to LEED Enterprise, we have our mandatory requirements. We call ours prerequisites. These are kind of like the no-brainer things that ENERGY STAR developed and said, there shouldn't be an ENERGY STAR building out there that doesn't have this. These are not allowed to be traded off. These are the very cost-effective, measures that we want in all our buildings. These are things that if you do energy audits on existing buildings down the road, these are the things that people look back and say, I wish we had done that in the beginning because it's too expensive to remediate now. We should have done that when we built this building. So this is not the full list of prerequisites, and I mentioned previously in those slides, like some of our prerequisites overlap with the ones for LEED and Enterprise. So this is just an example of a few of them. These are our poison pills. They're not actually called poison pills, but this is what we've been told from those that participate in the program. These are kind of the reasons or the prerequisites above LEED and above Enterprise that kind of deter projects from also seeking multifamily high-rise certification. The first one is a continuous insulation requirement. This is to reduce thermal bridging. So it's only a requirement if you're building metal buildings or if you're using metal framing. If you're doing wood framing, this actually doesn't apply to you. It's really more for our metal framed buildings. The lighting power allowance. So it's not just enough to say we want 100% high efficiency or ENERGY STAR or LED lighting. It's not enough to say you want just efficient technology. We do have an allowance for lighting. So in your common areas, you know, let's say the allowance is 10,000 watts. If you want to install 20,000, even though it's all LEDs, you can't do that in multifamily high-rise. We have a cap on that because just because you're installing all LEDs, if you're doing too many fixtures, it's really not energy efficient. You could actually be using more energy than you were if you were just using, you know, CFLs or incandescent fixtures if you were just using less of those. So there's two pieces. It's the technology as well as the actual number of fixtures. This one, pipe insulation, most engineers just kind of are used to doing code minimum insulation instead of looking at what the ENERGY STAR requirement is. Hydronic systems, I'm not sure if you guys have a lot of hydronic systems in your area, but requiring reverse return or balancing valves. We do have some limitations on how we handle heated systems in garages. These are ENERGY STAR buildings. Heating unconditioned space as large as a garage is just not something we feel comfortable with. So we have some limitations, some energy penalties associated with those systems. And then a test that is not a requirement in LEED or Enterprise is for central exhaust systems. So just like we want to test our in-unit forced air systems for duct leakage, we also want to look at those tall ventilation risers and see how much they're leaking. So if you do have others that you've been looking at multifamily high-rise and there are other prerequisites that you really struggle with, I'd love to know them. I'd love to add it to those lists when I present it. And we are often listening to our participants. And, you know, like this one about the garages, we're trying to listen to the feedback. We're trying to come up with alternative options that don't sacrifice energy efficiency. And as we can develop them, we release them as policy records, and those are on our website. So we're definitely interested to hear from you what you find to be the biggest challenge in terms of meeting our prerequisites. And, you know, the ones that we've delved out, like this one for thermal bridging, it's not just because of energy efficiency or to be unnecessarily difficult. Thermal bridging is a serious problem. It's not just an energy problem. If you're looking at this building, you can see that heat is being lost from this building around, this is a window, so this is a metal window frame. So you can see heat being lost through the metal window frame, through the through-wall air conditioner. Blue means it's cold, so this is a cold day, so we're not losing too much heat through the walls. That indicates this is well insulated. Some buildings you're going to see stripes here, vertical stripes. That would be thermal bridging through the wall studs because it wouldn't have continuous insulation. So by requiring continuous insulation here, we've mitigated that thermal loss. Now we do have, you can still see some stripes here. So these horizontal stripes are thermal bridging at the floor. So we do still have an accommodation for certain buildings to not have to do the continuous insulation all the way across the floor edge. But the point of thermal bridging, besides the energy loss, is what can occur inside the unit if you have thermal bridging. And so this is a corner of the inside of an apartment where mold is growing because there's not continuous insulation across stuff. It's no different than a soda can. That's, you know, a cold can of soda, and moisture in the air is going to condense on that soda can. Same thing is happening inside an apartment. If you have studs that aren't insulated, during the winter they're cold. If you have moisture on the inside of that apartment, when that moisture reaches that cold stud, it's going to condense, and that water is going to form mold and mildew. So remediating something like this, I'm not exactly sure the cost compared to just going ahead and installing the insulation from the beginning. So we do have a performance path, as I mentioned before. That's our modeling path. Our prescriptive path, which is not necessarily available if you've moved on to the 2012 or 2015 ITC. But basically, you would just go to our prescriptive path, and based on your climate zone, it would tell you what insulation requirements and what equipment efficiencies you need. Still the same testing and verification as well as benchmarking. Our testing and verification protocols, it's a 90-page PDF. It's exactly what it says here. It's the requirements for the plan review, inspection, testing of all components that, impact energy. So we tell you, if we want you to inspect something, we're going to tell you how to do it at the plan review stage as well as while you're in the field. We do have narrators. Like I said, I can't go through everything today, but we do have some webinars online that talk about the actual protocols. The reason for testing and verification, again, we want our developers to get what they paid for. We want mistakes to be found before they become problems. And we want these buildings to perform post-occupancy. There's no sense in building and paying for an ENERGY STAR building and not having it actually verified. So the protocols, real fast in terms of just structure, because I do want to leave some time for questions. The protocols, it's again following everything that consumes energy in the building, appliances to HVAC to ventilation. I highlighted in red here the ones that I think are in ENERGY STAR but not necessarily being looked at in LEED if you're following the 2010 rating system. So yes, we are looking at a few aspects that aren't part of LEED, so that is kind of an extra cost if you're pursuing the multifamily high-rise certification. But once you get into LEED V4, LEED V4 requires that you look at all those things anyways, so then we kind of get more on a similar page. Our protocols are set up the same way. It's more about understanding the structure. Obviously, I couldn't go through all of them, but each one starts with a table. You can't read it, but the table will tell you whether it's just a visual inspection or if it requires some kind of test procedure. This section, it says performance spec criteria. This is how you read a plan, a construction document or plans, and this is what you're looking for. The procedures and documentation section that tells you, what you're doing in the field and how you're going to document it. The schedule kind of gives you an idea whether you're doing it pre-drywall or post, completion. Responsible parties. It's not the person responsible for the test, but anybody who's kind of involved in that protocol, anybody who's involved with appliances. And then sampling requirements. We follow ResNet, so 7 in a row pass, and then you can sample 1 out of every 7. I won't go through the equipment list and the standards that are at the end of the protocols if you download them from our website, but a statement of substantial completion is kind of how we try to reduce the burden of some of this testing and verification, which is in addition or more above and beyond what you do for LEED or enterprise. We do actually allow some things to be inspected first party. So while LEED might be third party, we have some building components that we think are okay to be evaluated first party, like appliances, windows, and lighting. This is something that the installing contractor could do as long as they, follow the same procedures and documentation and sampling as I mentioned a second ago. If they follow that and they provide that documentation to the licensed professional, that licensed professional can use their information. I mean, they should spot check it and make sure it's legitimate and consistent with what they thought was supposed to be there, but they can use their photo documentation. I think actually, most people don't actually object to the process of testing and verification. I think people see the value in doing that verification for the building owner. I think it's probably more the Excel-based worksheet that we use and require as part of our submission process. So what happened was, we developed these protocols back in our pilot back in 2005. We didn't provide folks with a way to document how that was met in their plan review or how to document it out in the field. So we created, again, we're a free program. We created an Excel-based platform to conduct both in one shot, the plan review as well as the inspection phase. So we released that Excel file because, one, we didn't want all of our participants developing their own template, and also when they submitted to us, there's no way we could possibly review 100 different versions of somebody's plan review or their inspection report. So it is unfortunate that we were stuck with Excel, but we needed a software that most folks were already familiar with using. And we definitely needed a consistent template in terms of the review process. So those are the testing and verification worksheets. It's just an Excel-based file. You document the information from your building. There's a column for plan review. Just say yes, no if it's been met in the plan review, and then you don't have to fill out anything else again. At the inspection, you'll say yes, no again. Is this the same? Is it different? Does it still meet the ENERGY STAR requirements? So basically, for all the different energy components in the building, there's a page like this. The photo template, like I said, we do have a requirement for photo documentation. We're not going out to each of these buildings, so we do require at least for the first 3 buildings that a developer or a licensed professional submit photo documentation for all the protocols. So appliances, HVAC systems, everything gets submitted at the end of construction, and then after that it's waived. So you might be collecting those photos, and at this point you're submitting to us. We have listened to the feedback from our participants and tried to make the photo template more user-friendly. Right now we have a Word document where you just, you click on it and you upload the fixture or the window, whatever it prompts you to upload. You upload it there. If you don't want to use our Word-based template, folks asked us if they could do like a zip file. So we created a zip file structure where you could actually just dump all the JPEGs into that folder, but the downside there is you have to rename all those files. So we try to hear what you were saying and try to make this less tedious, as well as waiving it after 3 buildings were certified. Now, in terms of the testing and verification protocols, like I said, I want this to be a reference for you once you get into the rating system. So there's a long list of slides after this one, so I just want to show you what I've prepared here. And that way, when you do get into the program, if you are going to pursue ENERGY STAR multifamily high-rise and you want to compare this to what you would do in LEED, I'm just going to show you how these slides were developed. So on a requirement like this for ENERGY STAR appliances, I highlighted in red what I think is above and beyond LEED or Enterprise. So for appliances, I don't think LEED or Enterprise care that you document the ENERGY STAR appliances. So I highlighted in red that the ENERGY STAR program requires at least a photo of each appliance type, make, and model. In terms of hot water heating and cooling systems, we require delivery temperatures of the plumbing fixtures, the shower heads and the faucets, which is not required by LEED or Enterprise. The rest of this stuff, I think you're still verifying it for LEED or Enterprise because you need to verify this information, the size, the type of the heating, the rated efficiency. Otherwise, you're not able to create an energy model. So I have this all in black because you're somehow still having to verify that for LEED or Enterprise. So again, kind of quickly going through some of these, anything that's in red is something deemed to be above and beyond in order to meet ENERGY STAR. Again, it's the use of our T&V worksheets and the use of our photo template rather than submitting to LEED or Enterprise, whatever kind of format you want. Pipe insulation, again, it's a little higher than code, so you have to inspect that to make sure you're meeting the above code requirement. Our delivery temperatures. I'm going to jump to a duct leakage page. For those of you who are familiar with the duct leakage test, our duct leakage test is, again, it's a duct leakage test. It's a total duct leakage test. So when you depressurize or pressurize your duct system to 25 pascals, you're not also doing a simultaneous blower door. It's just the duct leakage test. If you're familiar with certified homes or ENERGY STAR certified homes program, they adopted this alternative metric where apartments that are smaller than 1,000 square feet, they don't have to follow this 8 CFM per 100 square feet because it just gets smaller and smaller. So the lowest you really have to worry about is this 80. So as long as you can get your duct leakage below 80, you don't necessarily have to go below 64. We do try and sync up with ENERGY STAR certified homes whenever we can. You can see I added this one in green. So to me, green means if you're doing if you're doing LEED, you might have to do more than what ENERGY STAR requires. So ENERGY STAR does not require duct leakage to be tested to the outside. That's that one with the simultaneous blower door. You would have to do, I think you would have to do that for LEED. I'm not sure if you have to do that for LEED version 4. All the envelope stuff is very, very similar to what you'd have to inspect for LEED and Enterprise. You're going to have to obviously inspect, the thickness and the type of insulation in order to inform your energy model. You might not have the robust photo documentation requirements that we have at ENERGY STAR, but in terms of the process, whoever's in the field verifying this information for you is going to be doing this scope of work. So I'm going to kind of fast forward through the envelope. This low E sensor, we do ask that raters or whoever's in the field check the low E sensor. That can make a big difference. If the low E coating is on the wrong surface, instead of rejecting that solar gain, you're going to be funneling it into an apartment and basically turning it into a greenhouse. I want to stop and take some questions. All the next slides are really, like I said, it's a desktop reference for you. Once you get the PDF, it's going to cycle through each one of our protocols. So just bear with me. I'm going to jump ahead. And unless, Brett, you don't see a lot of questions coming in, I'm just going to show a couple other slides while people maybe want to type in some questions that may have come up, or unless you want to answer some of the questions that are on there.
Yeah, if you want to go through a couple more things, there's one or two questions here, but yeah, if people want to ask some more, please start putting them in, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So in terms of a summary, like to make the leap to ENERGY STAR, if you're doing LEED or Enterprise, you're going to have to add some prerequisites. If you're not wood frame, you need continuous insulation. There's some limits on lighting power, extra pipe insulation. You have to go through our process, so that means a proposed design plan review and using our Excel file. So if you have a team that's going to do LEED or Enterprise, they're going to do a plan review. They're just not necessarily thinking of using our Excel file for it. So to do ENERGY STAR, they would have to do that in our Excel file. And likewise, if you're doing LEED or ENERGY STAR or Enterprise, you're doing some testing and you're doing some inspections. But to do ENERGY STAR, you would have to document it in our Excel file and using our photo template. The various partners are going to, estimate the level of effort differently, but we think if you're already doing one of the green rating systems, the extra documentation and verification is probably at least 40 to 60 hours. That doesn't include, whatever hard cost to actually add some of the prerequisites. But in terms of soft costs, the documentation, the extra verification to get the ENERGY STAR, at least a solid week. And while we wait for some questions to come in, I just want to show you, in terms of the ENERGY STAR logo, once the buildings are certified, we've seen how developers are using the logo in their lobbies or in the front of their building to demonstrate the apartments have achieved ENERGY STAR certification. During construction, you can also do a construction banner showing that it's been designed to earn the ENERGY STAR. This is the link to our website. Again, once you get the PDF, it's going to be a hyperlink. You can just click on it, and there's a green button to download a zip file that's going to have all our requirements already organized into subfolders for you. We have other webinars. We have one coming up on, I think next week, on an as-built submittal. So we have webinars almost every month or so at this point. We will be having one on Watersense. So similar to ENERGY STAR certification for an apartment, you can actually get Watersense certification for a multifamily unit. If you want to see some of our previous webinars, you can just email us. We have them all recorded. And then these are also going to be hyperlinks when you get the PDF.
Great, thanks. So I wanted to go back quick and just reiterate, what are the, for this question, what are the ASHRAE requirements on the high-rise program?
The ASHRAE requirements,
62.2 for ventilation, that is, anyway.
Okay, it'll be hard for me to find the slide in this one, but it's 62.2, 2007 for the apartment in ENERGY STAR multifamily high-rise. That's the same for LEED, so we're both using the same thing. But ASHRAE 62.2, the 2007 and the 2010, the rates actually stay the same. So if you were doing 30 CFM in your apartment, it would still be 30 CFM in 2010. Was the person asking the difference between 62.1 and 62.2?
Well, the question is, and I'm surprised we didn't get that one, but good I guess. But the question really was about LEED mid-rise requiring what to do for exhaust-only systems. And so my understanding with if you're using LEED for homes mid-rise, if you're doing an exhaust-only system, you have to follow. You have to detail where the supply air is coming from with ASHRAE 62.2, 2007. Is that the case for ENERGY STAR then as well?
No, so the way I understand it, again, I'm not the expert on LEED or Enterprise, but I would say Enterprise and ENERGY STAR are on the same page. We follow ASHRAE 62.2 as it's written for whole house ventilation, which means if you had, let's say, a bath fan that runs continuously to satisfy whole house and exhaust, it's acceptable even though you don't have a dedicated source of supply air. My understanding of LEED for homes mid-rise is in addition to that continuous exhausting system, you would have to dedicate supply air. You couldn't just get transfer air from a corridor. You'd have to provide something, like if it's an ERV or a supply in the outside, an outside air supply to the return of the air handler, you'd have to provide some source, dedicated source of fresh air, where that's not explicit in 62.2, so therefore it's not explicit in Enterprise or ENERGY STAR.
Okay, great. Well, I've got a couple other questions here, but real quick, since it is 1 o'clock, for those of you listening online, we will be sharing both the recording and the PowerPoint handout, PDF handout of this, so you can review all of that and access it. Make sure to take that survey that's coming your way. For those of you listening on demand, when we're done with this, make sure to take your 10-question quiz to pick up your continuing ed. So the other question, I guess, is about trade-offs. It was a very specific question from Abe, but on the exterior insulation of steel buildings. But I guess I wanted to sort of enlarge it to say, is there the ability to do a trade-off within the performance modeling that would allow you to forego a prerequisite if you can still meet the requirement in some other fashion?
No. So the way the prerequisites were developed is that the same way LEED and Enterprise. These are prerequisites that are just mandatory. There is absolutely no trade-off within something that's mandatory. So his specific question about continuous exterior insulation, while he could probably achieve a much better U value, just crank up the insulation within the stud cavities and give up the exterior insulation and achieve or exceed the U value needed. The exterior insulation, that continuous insulation, provides a value that is not represented in the U value. The mitigation of the thermal loss and the avoidance of that, that growth of mold that's going to be, you could see inside in that photograph that I showed earlier. So the prerequisites were definitely developed in such a way that they could not be traded off.
And you did mention that on the ENERGY STAR side of things, you do have a design submittal process for as designed. Yes. Is that correct? Okay.
Yep.
I don't believe that exists in LEED for homes.
You are correct. That
but
part
though
is correct.
we do as providers and raters highly encourage preliminary plan reviews to avoid all sorts of messes in the end. I'm assuming you guys are on board with that too.
Yeah, that is the reason we made it mandatory, only because at the end of the project, it's complete, and if any prerequisite was missed, there's no gray area in ENERGY STAR. We can't waive a requirement, even though you did your best. We can't waive the requirement. So in order to support the project teams, we have to see it as a proposed design. That way we can at least say, we don't see this represented in your drawings. We think we're gonna fail, but you at least have time because you brought it to us before it went out to bid, or you brought it to us before construction started. So you have time. If you need to make the change, you still have time. Once it's as built, we've definitely had projects where their finance agency, they made them remediate, and we were going to fail. We had to we couldn't certify a project because they failed a certain test or a requirement, and they were required to remediate at the very end, which can be very, very costly. So we do make it a requirement that we see you guys at the design stage.
And then the last question I have is, are there any exceptions for those who are doing, or anything different for those who are doing gut rehab projects?
It's a similar kind of approach as we have for the Certified Homes program, where, we don't prevent gut rehabs or significant rehabs from participating as long as they can meet every single requirement. I know Certified Homes tried to go through and make some accommodations. We haven't yet, so as of right now, there aren't any modifications to our program requirements if it's a historic or a gut rehab.
Oh, you're talking about if LEED or Enterprise has some accommodations, but...
It's possible that, right, it is possible that LEED or Enterprise has accommodations, but ENERGY STAR Multifamily High-Rise does not. The requirements stay exactly the same. There's no, we don't prohibit those types of projects from participating, but they have to meet the same requirements as a new construction building.
Right. Yeah. I know there's, I know for LEED for homes, low-rise gut rehab, there's some exemptions to ENERGY STAR 3. And I know for Enterprise low-rise, if you've got a masonry building, there's some exemptions for the HERS index. But as far as mid-rise using the high-rise program go, I don't know if they have actually created any of those or not.
Yep.
So it would be interesting to see. Okay, well, we are gonna wrap up here. I really want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to thank Gayatri here from Stephen Winter Associates, as well as ICF International, who connected us all, for taking the time to go through that. Make sure to check out more of their webinars and more of their resources to learn a little bit more. For those of you listening live, I'm dropping in a coupon code and a link here for our session kicking off on the environmental quality side of LEED for Homes. So if you want to check that out, you can use that to get a little discount. But thanks again. Thanks everyone for your time, and enjoy the rest of the week.
Great. Thanks, Brett.
Yep.